Greetings. You have your ticket? You don't have one? No problem, my friend. Just hit the description button below. Come on in. Hey guys, want to do a brief video today, and this is to individuals who may not understand what a tariff is. And no disrespect to copper-colored people, the Hebrews, here in America, Aboriginal people, Turtle Island. I know that a lot of things that's related to economics are not typically taught to us in our public schools. And so there are many terms and ways of doing business that at times, they escape us because, again, we don't get that type of formal education in many of the public schools in the inner cities. So for you particularly, I want to give you an example, give you some feedback. Excuse me, I'm trying to adjust this thing because if I can't see you, I suspect you can't see me. So, all right, maybe this will be a little better. We'll see. But what a tariff is, and this is important because right now, President Trump has just raised the tariffs on China from 10% to 25%. And that is going to have an effect on the cost of goods eventually. Now, you may not see that immediately. And here's what a tariff is. It's a I guess the best way to say it is a tax that's placed on goods that are either imported or exported from one sovereign country to another. Okay? That's pretty much what it is. Hope this is better. Okay. There you go. Yeah, it looks better. So it's a tax or a duty tax, just like the tax you might pay on a loaf of bread, at your local grocery store or at Walmart. But it's different in terms of how it works with sovereign countries in an international environment. And what tariffs are, they are stable prices or a stable duty tax, same thing, that's placed upon particular goods that are being exported or imported between countries. Give you an example. Let's just say that a loaf. Okay, I won't use that. Cheese. Let's just say if cheese is selling for $100 a pound. Okay, I know that's ridiculous. Well, you could put a tariff on that cheese. If you're getting that cheese from Italy, then you could put a 10% tariff on the cheese that you export from Italy to America, or you could put a 25% or whatever number you want to put on that particular cheese. Now, if the price of cheese goes percentage, if that price of cheese goes up or down, the tariff stays the same. So let's just say the cheese goes to $80, a pound. You still, if the tariff is 5% or 10% or 25%, that number is a stable number. Okay? So that number does not fluctuate with the price of goods. That is a set number based on the cost of doing business as it relates to importing or exporting goods from one country to another country. Importing is you're getting it from another country into your country. Exporting it is things you're making and you're selling it to other countries. Okay? That makes sense to you. Now, typically, with this tariff that's going on with China, right now, China holds about a little bit over $1 trillion of our debt, about 1.1 trillion, $1.2 trillion of debt. Now, that debt has nothing to do necessarily with the tariffs, but that debt has a lot to do with China's behavior as it relates to America. Okay, and right now, if you look at the trade deficit, again, importing and exporting. Right now, China exports into America right about, and somebody correct me, I think the number is somewhere about $500 billion of goods into America. That's everything from cell phones to automobiles, washing machines, things that are made in China. They export that to America and at about $500 billion annually. We export to China somewhere in the neighborhood of right about I think about $50 billion, somewhere in that neighborhood, $50 to $100 billion. I know that's a big gap, $50 to $100 billion, but it's right in that neighborhood. What President Trump intends to do is to narrow the trade or the tariff or the export disadvantage, as he calls it. Because what he's saying is that, okay, we're buying $500 billion of your merchandise, but you're only buying, $50 billion of our merchandise. And he sees that as just unfair. So what he's saying is that if you don't take and not lower, but buy more product from us, then what we're going to do is raise the price of goods coming to us, onto you. And that tariff money, that extra money, so that, let's just say that a cheese goes from $100, and I may have forgotten to explain that, I do apologize. But let's say if that cheese goes from a tariff of 10%, if it's $100, then that cheese is going to be $110. Every 100 pounds of cheese comes here. We're charging them an additional $10, for allowing that cheese to come into the country. If that cheese goes to a 25%, which is what President Trump just put in effect last week, to 25%, now that cheese is costing them $125 every time for every 100 pounds that they ship into the country. Okay? And that's a way of getting additional revenue into the hands of Americans, but the Chinese have to absorb that cost. And what typically happens, and this is where it comes in to hurt us, now they're going to raise the cost of their goods to make up for that loss. So the day where you may be, let's just say if you were looking to buy a home, well, if that, depending on who owns the finance company, let's just say that finance company is a company in China, which is very possible. Then if we charge a 25% tariff, and let's just say that home was $500,000. Well, what China is simply going to do is that they're going to raise the price of that home to whatever that percent of that tariff is that we raise. So if we raise it by 15%, then they're going to raise the price of that house by 15%, or the materials to make that house, whatever it is that they're importing in here. So ultimately, you are going to absorb that cost. American citizens are going to absorb that cost. Now, the reason I said ultimately, because you won't feel it immediately. What you're going to do when they have to resupply, companies, they do have a return on inventory, what they call it. So in other words, they buy inventory in advance at a certain price, and then once that inventory starts to dry up, they replenish that order, hopefully at the same price. But if the tariff goes up, as it has in this situation, now where you last year or this year you may be able to get again that house, let's just say for $510,000 or maybe $550,000. Well, with that additional 15%, you may be talking about now getting that same house instead of for $550,000. That house might cost you over $600,000. So you will be penalized, in terms of if the tariff goes up, because that cost gets passed down to the middle class, because typically that's where the most of the America's revenue is generated, from the middle class. And we know that. And it's typically the middle class that keeps the economy going. And what's the middle class? If you're making somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000, $110,000, you're considered middle class. All right. If you're making less than $50,000, then obviously it's going to hurt you as much. Maybe it hurts you even more, if that's even believable. But most people at the lower end can't afford those things, so they may not actually experience it as much as the middle class people who are really purchasing washing machines and cell phones and automobiles, homes, things of that nature. So if you think that it's a good thing that Donald Trump is raising the tariffs, in a way, it's good if you're the person that's going to collect the duty off of that, but it's not good if you're the person who's going to pay, the additional cost that it costs that company who's got to pay that tariff. All right? So ultimately, it may be a year from now, maybe 6 months from now, depending on how the goods go through. But when we get ready to place our next order with China, you're going to see prices start to go up. In some cases, dramatically. Okay? And so, that's kind of a short, simplistic explanation for tariffs. So it is a tax on goods that's either being imported or exported. What Donald Trump is trying to do is narrow the trade gap between the United States and China. And whether that works or not remains to be seen. China, just so you know, it's not in China's best interest to do anything drastic, like drop that $1 trillion debt that America has, because all they're going to do is hurt themselves, because if they drop that debt, then they take that loss, so they're not interested in doing that. So they have to own the debt that they own, no more than if you owe a tax, if you owe credit card company. That credit card company is not really interested in you declaring bankruptcy. You see what I'm saying? Because they lose. China, same thing. If they drop, that debt that they hold, it's gonna hurt them way more than it's gonna hurt, the American economy in that regard. Okay, but the taxes or the tariff, the duty, that is something that you need to be concerned about and you need to be aware of. And ultimately, and I'll say this again to copper color people, because typically you have a lot of the entry-level retail jobs, those jobs, the service industry jobs. Depending on how expensive the cost of goods become, that's going to result in layoffs for a lot of you guys. So a lot of you guys very well can end up losing your jobs, because if the company cannot afford to keep you on and they have to offset, if the company has to offset its costs that is paying for those higher tariffs on goods that are coming in, because they raised the prices on the goods. So the company is not paying for the tariff. The company is paying for the new cost of goods that other company is going to raise its price to cover the expense of the tariff. All right? And so now, it's because the prices are gone, goods are going to go up, then companies are going to try to offset that loss. And the number one expense that any corporation has is typically payroll, especially in retail and the service industry. That's the number one expense, is payroll. So that's normally the very first place they're going to go to start cutting expenses to offset any losses or potential losses in profitability. Okay? So I hope that helps some. I think I got probably 90% of that right. In the comments, if anybody can think of anything I left out, please feel free to add it so that the listeners, will have a better understanding. But ultimately, it could affect jobs here in America, especially the service industry, which means, retail, any kind of thing that provides service, and those industry, those type of jobs could be at risk. What I'm saying? Not everybody, but, if you got a workforce of 20 people, 3 people might get laid off. If it's 100 people, 10 people might get laid off. Whatever it's going to take to offset that expense to that particular corporation so that it protects its bottom line, which it has to, because it has to protect its shareholder value. Thanks for listening. DFG. Talk to you later, guys. Bye now.